Welcome back to Talk Right, your source of all things writing and literature. Today, I wanted to take another look at one of our brilliant beginnings with a brilliant novel and one that honestly is a little bit difficult to talk about because how do you even start with an epic like this? I'm speaking, of course, of James Joyce's Ulysses. Now, this is one of my favorite novels, although I can't really tell you exactly why I like it so much. Every time I look at it, there are new things that capture my attention. Usually, I'm drawn in by Joyce's language. That's probably the number one sell for this for me. But like I said, every time I go through, there's more things that I get. And what I thought I would do today is take a look at the opening pages and show you a little bit of how Joyce so tightly structures his narrative, but not in the ways that we usually associate with novel writers. So here we go. This is James Joyce's Ulysses. Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him by the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned, Introibo ad altare Dei. Halted, he peered down the dark, winding stairs and called up coarsely, Come up, Kinch! Come up, you fearful Jesuit! Solemnly he came forward and mounted the round gun rest. He faced about and blessed gravely thrice the tower, the surrounding country, and the awakening mountains. Then, catching sight of Stephen Dedalus, he bent towards him and made rapid crosses in the air, gurgling in his throat and shaking his head. Stephen Dedalus, displeased and sleepy, leaned his arms on the top of the staircase and looked coldly at the shaking, gurgling face that blessed him, equine in its length, and at the light, untonsured hair, grained and hued like pale oak. Buck Mulligan peeped an instant under the mirror and then covered the bowl smartly. Back to barracks, he said sternly. He added in a preacher's tone, For this, oh dearly beloved, is the genuine Christine, body and soul and blood and ounce. Slow music, please. Shut your eyes, gents. One moment. A little trouble about those white corpuscles. Silence all. He peered sideways up and gave a long, low whistle of call, then paused a while in rapt attention, his even white teeth glistening here and there with gold points. Chrysostomos. Two strong, shrill whistles answered through the calm. Thanks, old chap, he cried briskly. That will do nicely. Switch off the current, will ya? He skipped off the gun rest and looked gravely at his watcher, gathering about his legs the loose folds of his gown. The plump, shadowed face and sullen oval jowl recalled a prelate, patron of arts in the Middle Ages. A pleasant smile broke quietly over his lips. The mockery of it, he said gaily. Your absurd name, an ancient Greek. He pointed his finger in friendly jest and went over to the parapet, laughing to himself. Stephen Dedalus stepped up, followed him wearily halfway, and sat down on the edge of the gun rest, watching him still as he propped his mirror on the parapet, dipped the brush in the bowl, and lathered cheeks and neck. Buck Mulligan's gay voice went on. My name is absurd, too. Malachi Mulligan, 2 dactyls. But it has a Hellenic ring, hasn't it? Tripping and sunny like the Buck himself. We must go to Athens. Will you come if I can get the aunt to fork out 20 quid? He laid the brush aside and, laughing with delight, cried, Will he come? The jejune Jesuit! Ceasing, he began to shave with care. Tell me, Mulligan, Stephen said quietly. Yes, my love? How long is Haynes going to stay in this tower? Buck Mulligan showed a shaven cheek over his right shoulder. God, isn't he dreadful? He said frankly. A ponderous Saxon. He thinks you're not a gentleman. God, these bloody English, bursting with money and indigestion, because he comes from Oxford. You know, Dedalus, you have the real Oxford manner. He can't make you out. Oh, my name for you is the best. Kinch, the knife blade. He shaved warily over his chin. He was raving all night about a Black Panther, Stephen said. Where is his gun case? A woeful lunatic, Mulligan said. Were you in a funk? I was, Stephen said with energy and growing fear, out here in the dark with a man I don't know, raving and moaning to himself about shooting a Black Panther. You saved men from drowning. I'm not a hero, however. If he stays on here, I am off. Buck Mulligan frowned at the lather on his razor blade. He hopped down from his perch and began to search his trouser pockets hastily. Scutter! He cried thickly. He came over to the gun rest and, thrusting a hand into Stephen's upper pocket, said, Lend us a loan of your nose rack to wipe my razor. Stephen suffered him to pull out and hold up on show by its corner a dirty, crumpled handkerchief. Buck Mulligan wiped the razor blade neatly. Then, gazing over the handkerchief, he said, The bard's nose rag. A new color for our Irish poets. Snot green. You can almost taste it, can't you? He mounted to the parapet again and gazed out over Dublin Bay, his fair oak-pale hair stirring slightly. God, he said quietly, isn't the sea what Algy calls it? A great sweet mother. The snot-green sea. The scrotum-tightening sea. Epi honipa ponton. Ah, Daedalus, the Greeks, I must teach you. You must read them in the original. Thalata, Thalata. She is our great sweet mother. Come and look. Stephen stood up and went over to the parapet. Leaning on it, he looked down on the water and on the mailboat clearing the harbor mouth of Kingston. Our mighty mother, Buck Mulligan said. He turned abruptly his great searching eyes from the sea to Stephen's face. The aunt thinks you killed your mother, he said. And that's why she won't let me have anything to do with you. Someone killed her, Stephen said gloomily. You could have knelt down, damn it, Kench, when your dying mother asked you, Buck Mulligan said. I'm Hyperborean as much as you, but to think of your mother begging you with her last breath to kneel down and pray for her, and you refused. There is something sinister in you. He broke off and lathered again lightly his farther cheek. A tolerant smile curled his lips. What a lovely mummer, he murmured to himself. Kinch, the loveliest mummer of them all. He shaved evenly and with care, in silence, seriously. Stephen, an elbow rested on the jagged granite, leaned his palm against his brow and gazed at the fraying edge of his shiny black coat sleeve. Pain, that was not yet the pain of love, fretted his heart. Silently in a dream she had come to him after her death, her wasted body within its loose brown grave clothes giving off an odor of wax and rosewood, her breath that had bent upon him mute, reproachful, a faint odor of wetted ashes. Across the threadbare cuffage he saw the sea hailed as a great sweet mother by the well-fed voice beside him. The ring of bay and skyline held a dull green mass of liquid. A bowl of white china had stood beside her deathbed, holding the green sluggish bile which she had torn up from her rotting liver by fits of loud, groaning vomiting. Buck Mulligan wiped again his razor blade. Now, like I said, it's impossible to go through all the details that Joyce is packing in here, so what I want to do is just take a look at some of the things that stand out for me. Now, if you didn't catch it, there's not actually a lot of narrative going on here, and in fact, that's Ulysses for you. What's really happening? So we have Buck Mulligan. He is living in a tower with his friend Stephen Daedalus, and they're living with one more person named Haynes. In the beginning, in the opening part of morning, Buck Mulligan ascends to the top of the tower, the parapet. He looks over Dublin Bay. He shaves himself. He calls down to his friend Stephen to come on up. They talk a little bit about the other person living with them, Haynes, who is suffering these nightmares of a Black Panther. And then they chat a little bit about this and that. And then in the final part of the section I read, Buck Mulligan references the fact that Stephen's mother died and Stephen didn't pray for her. Stephen then remembers, while she was dying, the bowl in which she coughed up things, and that's how the section ends. So why is this significant? What's important about this? The first thing I like is that it's not really a proper beginning at all to such a massive novel. We're used to these things, these great aphorisms we might use to begin a section. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a man with a fortune is in want of a good wife, or every happy family is alike, but each unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. I'm butchering these opening lines, but you see what I'm getting at. The other grand openings that we have begin with a huge piece of action or with introducing a character. In the year 1857, blah 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 was born, or such and such a battle took place. Joyce does none of that. We have a guy, Buck Mulligan, who's living in a tower. We don't know why. He ascends the parapet to shave. We don't know why he's doing that. He recites the Latin of the Catholic Mass, in turribo ad altare Dei, I will go to the altar of God, which is what the priest usually says. We don't know why he's burlesquing the Mass in this way. He calls down to his friend Stephen Dedalus, whom we don't know. Stephen comes up displeased and sleepy. We don't really know that until Stephen says that Haynes, their roommate, whom we haven't been introduced to, is suffering from nightmares of a Black Panther. We don't know why he does that either. And then suddenly Buck Mulligan is talking a little bit about going to Athens. We don't know why he wants to do that. And then he's getting on to his friend Kinch. We don't know why he calls Stephen Dedalus Kinch, but he does, about not praying for his mother, which is a scene we have not seen yet. So what is going on? Why is Joyce foisting all these details upon us? Well, if you have read anything about epic, or if you have read anything about Ulysses, you'll know that epics never begin in the very beginning of the action. Homer doesn't begin the Iliad at the beginning of the Trojan War, nor does he begin the Odyssey with the ending of the Trojan War, nor does Virgil begin the Aeneid with the ending of the Trojan War. None of these things begin exactly where the main action takes place, and that is a well-known tactic called in medias res, beginning in the middle. That's exactly what Joyce does here. We don't know the information, the background, the backstory of these characters, but that actually allows for a greater amount of our participation in the narrative whenever we are fed a bit of backstory, like Stephen Dedalus's dying mother, or like his relationship with his roommate, Haynes. We latch onto that as a bit of characterization. And Joyce does this intentionally, bringing the reader more and more into the story and getting our attention invested even further. But actually, the real beginning is when Buck Mulligan says, in turribo ad altare Dei, I will go to the altar of God. This establishes one of the great themes of the story, which even here is developed a little bit, and that is the theme of Stephen Dedalus's, and to an extent, Buck Mulligan's Christianity. We know at the end of this section that the reason Buck Mulligan gets on to Stephen is because Stephen refused to pray for his own dying mother. We will get more information about that later, but suffice it to say, Stephen didn't feel like he could pray honestly, having determined to give up his religion. Now, we will follow the consequences of that action later on throughout the story, but here the initial theme is sounded off, the theme of the Mass. And yet, it's not Stephen that sounds off the theme of the Mass and Catholicism, it's Buck Mulligan, and he doesn't do it seriously. He does it as a burlesque. We have not the Eucharist that's being offered, but a bowl of shaving cream water. And then on the shaving cream water, we have a mirror and a razor that lay crossed. Now, crossing a mirror and a razor in a bowl, it's not the most natural place. You would think you would just toss them into the bowl, but Buck Mulligan has intentionally placed them in a cross as a way of mocking the Mass. He then later on mocks the Mass by saying this, for this, O dearly beloved, is the genuine Christine, body and soul and blood and owns here being wounds. Slow music, please. Shut your eyes, gents. One moment. A little trouble about those white corpuscles. Silence all. Again, that is a Mass, but it's being mocked here through Buck Mulligan. And Buck Mulligan is the great mocker. That's one of the reasons that Stephen Dedalus doesn't really like him. Which leads to another reason why this is such a taut, well-constructed opening. We don't have any direct characterization, but we come to understand exactly what the relationship between Buck Mulligan and Stephen Dedalus is. Buck Mulligan comes off here not only as mocking, but as actually a little bit cruel. He never really calls Stephen Dedalus by his name. He calls him Kinch, the knife blade. He calls him fearful Jesuit. He calls him an ancient Greek. He says, your name is absurd. He's mocking his friend throughout this time, and Stephen just kind of sits there and takes it, not really speaking back. You get the idea that their relationship is just Stephen bearing this guy who doesn't take anything seriously, not even his own friends. But the cruelty comes in later when Buck Mulligan references Stephen's dead mother. He says, "The aunt won't let me have anything to do with you because you killed your mother." What an accusation that is to make to Stephen. You killed her. And Stephen says somebody killed her, and then Buck Mulligan doubles down. You could have prayed at her side, Stephen. This is clearly something that Stephen hasn't really processed because he largely remains quiet, and then we get his dream a little bit after this passage. But the fact that Buck Mulligan is referencing this and then smiling about it and then bringing it up, it just shows that he doesn't really value how Stephen is going to take it. Stephen's dead mother is one of the huge themes of Ulysses. It drives most of his thinking throughout the entire day, and it leads to the explosive climax later on. We don't really have that much about it right here, but at the end of the section, there is a bit of symbolism and imagery that shows how Joyce will incorporate the idea of Stephen's mother later on. I'm going to read the image one more time. Pain that was not yet the pain of love fretted his heart. Silently, in a dream, she had come to him after her death, her wasted body within its loose brown grave clothes, giving off an odor of wax and rosewood, her breath that had bent upon him, mute, reproachful, a faint odor of wetted ashes. Across the threadbare cuffage, he saw the sea hailed as a great sweet mother by the well-fed voice beside him. The ring of bay and skyline held a dull green mass of liquid. A bowl of white china had stood beside her deathbed holding the green sluggish bile which had been torn up from her rotting liver by fits of loud, groaning vomiting. So Stephen had a dream of his dead mother shortly after she passed away, and then he recalls when she was dying the bowl of green liquid that she had coughed out. At the same time, Buck Mulligan has just been referencing the wine-dark sea, the Gulf of Dublin, right there before them. What Stephen now sees is the bowl of his mother's bile and the Sea of Dublin intermingling with each other. Now this is going to make a connection in Stephen's mind that Ireland is in a sense his dead mother. Ireland in a sense the mother he has betrayed. And Ireland in a sense the mother from whom he has run away. Together, Joyce makes this connection between Mother Ireland and his real mother, and this ultimately is going to press down upon Stephen's psyche and instigate a crisis for him later on. But you can already see in the beginning section how Joyce is working in the symbolism of the water and the symbolism of Stephen's dead mother and the symbolism of Ireland, the mother whom he has betrayed. Like I said in the beginning, one of the great pleasures for me is returning to Joyce's language. And although there isn't really anything that just leaps out and excites me in the same way that you might get from Nabokov's Lolita, there are just a number of absolutely incandescent passages that still sound off well to me. We have this absolute wonderful poise and balance with language. Just in the first line, see how well balanced the sentence is. Stately plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and razor lay crossed. We have these constant doublings in that first sentence. Stately plump, and then bowl of lather, and then mirror and razor. And we have these sorts of pairings all throughout the section. There's also these occasional sort of Latinate sentence structures and patterns that Joyce employs. Things that, for example, will put the object of the sentence at the very end. For example, this sentence, Stephen suffered him to pull out and hold up on show by its corner a dirty, crumpled handkerchief. Now, I don't know why I like it so much, but just that delayed predicate adds something extra and meaningful to that sentence. And then finally, we have the sentence that I've already read once, but I'll read again, of Stephen's dream. Silently in a dream, she had come to him after her death, her wasted body within its loose brown grave clothes, giving off an odor of wax and rosewood, her breath that had bent upon him, mute, reproachful, a faint odor of wetted ashes. Just those sensory details, wetted ashes, wax and rosewood, and then the voice itself, mute, reproachful. I could go on and on about Ulysses, but if I did, we would be here all day. If you have not read this book, I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's one of those that will pose significant challenges the first time you go through it, but every time after that will just augment its pleasures. Hi guys, thank you so much for watching that. If you enjoyed that, go ahead and consider subscribing to my channel or also following me on Substack. And if you really like what I do, you might also consider checking out my book, Cheers, Around the World in 80 Toasts, a compendium of all the different ways to toast around the world. Thank you so much. Happy reading.